All right, welcome everyone. This is the beginning of our summer adult faith formation series entitled Justice, Happiness, and the Meaning of Life. We intend it to go for 4 Sundays in a row. So it's a good thing you're here for the opener, because each is going to be a succeeding episode that connects to the previous ones. So for starters, I think I would like to ask you a question. Since I'm a philosopher, I like to do that. How many of you would raise your hands and say, you think of yourself as a good person? See, I can always tell I'm giving a talk to a Catholic audience because that's the response. When I talk to Protestants, it's always, what? And those of you who weren't quite sure, how many of you would say, I should like to think of myself as a good person? If I were a good person, I would think better of myself. And the rest of the hands go up. Yes, of course, right? Because we tend to think of moral goodness as something worth having, don't we? Right? And we use other words for this. In theology, in the Bible, we'll see the word righteousness. Same concept, right? In the Old Testament, sometimes we'll talk about it in terms of justice, as when Job was a just man. We don't really talk that way so much anymore, right? And so I want to talk about justice today in that sense, not criminal justice or social justice or any of those communal forms of justice, but the justice of the individual soul. In other words, just how valuable is it? Why do we love it? Do we love it in and of itself, or do we perhaps love it for the things that come from it? Right? For example, if you were trying to tell your children how it is that they ought to be good people, you might tell them something like this. Well, do you want to have friends? And they'd be like, well, I'd love to have friends. Well, then you better be a nice person. Nobody wants to be friends with someone who's not nice. And your child will say, yes, I should probably be just if I want to have friends. So they're loving justice as a means to an end, the goal of having some friends, right? A positive good. On the other hand, you could imagine a negative argument like, well, maybe I shouldn't embezzle funds from my employer, because if I do, the negative consequence is prison. So to avoid prison time, I think I'm going to live a just life. And so justice is sought in those cases, not for its own value, but because of the things it brings us. It brings us goodies like friends, and it avoids harms like prison. Right? Now, on the other hand, we might talk about justice as something that we love in and of itself. And the question is, do we really love justice itself, or only the things we get for it, the goodies? Here's a way to think about it. What do you do when no one's looking? Do you behave the same way you act when people are looking? And if there's a discrepancy, how do you account for that? If you say, well, my justice commitment does slide somewhat, then do you love justice itself, or only the goodies that come from justice when people are observing you? Right? Because if we could do bad things and get away with it, maybe that would be the better course. Maybe what we really love is not justice at all, but the things we get. And if we could get those things much cheaper with much less effort, right? What if you could have all the happiness in the world and not have to waste your time going to Mass? Be like, this is why the priest isn't here, because if he heard that argument, he'd be like, wait a minute, right? But what if you could? What if you could be perfectly happy with just, injecting H into your arm? Happiness or heroin? Then why would you bother with justice? In other words, maybe we should not be pursuing justice at all. Maybe what we really like is power. And the only reason we pursue justice is because we don't have the power to get the things that we want. And because we're weak, then we get all of us together and say, oh, let's commit ourselves to justice. So do we really love justice, or do we only love the things it brings to us? Because if it's the things that we get from it that we truly love, then maybe what we're after isn't justice, but power. There's a very ancient story about a guy named Gyges. And one day he found a magical ring. Now, you're familiar with these kinds of magical rings because, of course, you've heard of the stories by Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, yes? And you remember this ring that Bilbo and Frodo had? That if you put it on, it would turn you invisible, right? Let me tell you something. Geigi's ring was way superior to Frodo and Bilbo's ring. Now, I know some of you are Tolkien fans. You're like, give me a break. Seriously? Better? Let me tell you why. Fundamental flaw with Bilbo's ring. It can fall off. And when it falls off, you're doomed, right? Not good. Other thing, who is the person that always sees you when you put on Frodo's ring? Sauron, the most wicked, horrible, evil lord of all Middle-earth. I don't consider that good, effective invisibility, right? You want an invisibility screen that protects you from the eyes of all men and even all gods. And this ancient pagan ring was supposed to be able to protect you from the eyes of all. Frodo, when he puts the ring on, as he walks out of the water, leaves footprints. I don't consider that very effective. Geigi's ring, no footprints. Bloodhounds can't smell you out. Infrared beams cannot tell. The Romulans from Star Trek are envious of this cloaking device. So no more of the Tolkien analogies. Geigi's ring is superior. So Geigi's got this ring. And he was at the bar that night with his friends, and something occurred to him. He thought to himself, I wonder what my friends say about me when I'm not around. Have you ever wondered that? Well, you know what you say about your friends when they're not around. So odds are they say similar things about you when you're not around. You say, of course that's true, but it's the details we want to know. Of course you do. And Geigi's wanted to know those details to be that proverbial fly in the wall. So he made a big to-do. Oh, guys, I got to go. Wife wants me home early tonight, so I'll see you next week. So he goes out of the pub, looks both ways, and his magical ring has a gemstone on it that turns it on and off. He doesn't have to take it off like Bilbo's ring, another superiority point, okay? And he clicks it and he turns it on. Total invisibility. He walks back into the bar, and boy, does he hear things that evening. Well, his friends run into a series of unfortunate events on their way home. One keeps tripping over and over again. Can't understand it because he doesn't see any branches in his way. Another, the one who had the worst things to say about Geigi's, felt like the whole way home he was running into a fist. And when he got home and looked in the mirror, sure enough, there was a bloody fist outline, but he never saw a thing. Now, of course, Geigi's laughed about this for a few days until he realized the true potential for this ring. And to make a long story short, he eventually killed the king, seduced the queen, and took over the kingdom, and, of course, lived happily ever after. I'm trying to pitch this story to Disney. I think it's a great story. For 20 years, they haven't even answered my calls, right? Now, I'll bet you that troubles you a little bit. You say, everything was fine until and they lived happily ever after. What do you mean they live happily ever after? There has to be some accountability. There has to be some change, right? Well, does there? Does it bother you that Geigi's gets away with it? Why bother being good if you could get away with being bad? What if you had that invisibility ring? What would you do with it? I can see the wheels are turning. You're making your list. Well, let's make the story contemporary. Let's get rid of kings and queens and kingdoms. And let's say you're walking down through town and you come across the Huntington Bank. And you, for whatever reason, you like to walk around town invisible. By the way, one warning point, cars cannot see you. So whenever you're crossing, be very careful. More invisible people have been killed at crossing points because they forget, right? So you go into the bank, and you see the vault open. And being a curious person, you think to yourself, I wonder what's in that vault. Because you've seen television, and they're always filled with gold and money and gems, right? Or safety deposit boxes. And you think, I'd sure like to know, I'd love to see in there. Forgetting for a moment that you're invisible. You see the no unauthorized entry sign, and then you put two and two together and say, I'm invisible. This does not apply to me. So you jump over the turnstile and in you go. And would you believe that this very morning, the Wells Fargo company dropped off a huge crate of $100 bills, $100 million worth. You're like, wow. And you have a deeply aesthetic experience. You are amazed at the artistry in those bills, right? That's what you're thinking about. The beautiful green colors, the intricacy of the lettering. It's purely an artistic experience you're having, right? what you're thinking. Right? What are you thinking? What could I do with all this money? What could you do with it? Well, we had that Focus guy today. What do you think he would think if you gave him a check for $50 million for the Focus ministry? So he'd be very pleased with that. Right? What about the soup kitchens? Think how many soup kitchens you could fund. All the other missionaries you could support. Right? Vaccination programs. You could do so many things with that money. Maybe you'd need, 20% for your expenses? Does that seem too high? 10%. 10% for expenses, 90% devoted to all these ends. Imagine what you could do. Would you take that money? You're like, well, this money is probably the life savings of poor widows. And I would not be taking from the rich to give to the poor like Robin Hood. I would be taking from Peter to pay Paul, and that doesn't sound quite right. So your conscience gets in the way, and you say, I'm not taking the money, right? As you head out of the bank, you notice 4 letters on the teller station. What are those 4 letters? F, D, I, C. Federal government insures now all depositors up to how much money? $250,000. That means all the poor widows are covered up to $250,000. You say, yeah, but what if the poor widow had more than that? Well, she's not so poor now, is she? Good point. And so you think, I think I'm going back into the bank vault. I'm going to collect some money, right? But once you get there, it suddenly occurs to you, wait a minute. Now I'm not stealing from poor widows. Now I'm stealing from the federal government. And that strikes you as not so good. And as you look at that money, those gorgeous Ben Franklins, you think back to the time of Ben Franklin, the Boston Tea Party. And you remember your history books and you think, what did they revolt over, those people? What was the tax rate? Right? What was the tax rate England imposed, Parliament imposed? And if you think back, you realize it was about 3.5% to 4%. You're like, 3.5% to 4%. Then you start doing the math. Ohio state income tax, federal income tax, Social Security tax, registrations, property tax, school tax. Good God, where does it end? And if you add it all up, how much taxes and percentage-wise do you actually pay? Right? Probably on the order of 40 to 50%. 40 to 50% versus 3.5% to 4%. You're like, I have a feeling that this money actually belongs to me, the taxpayer anyway, so all I'm doing is taking my own money from the bank. And so you grab the money, and out you go. Now, some of you, of course, would not need this form of elaborate reasoning. You would just see the money, pick it up, and go. Simple. Right? Others of you, money just doesn't matter to you. I would have to run the entire scenario again at a shoe store. And then you'd be like, oh, yes, I would take the shoes, yes. So would you take the money? Honestly, do you think, yeah, maybe I would take that money? If you would take the money, then jump up out of your seats and go to this side. And if you say, no, I don't think I would take the money, then jump up out of your seats and go to this side. And if you're immobile due to various reasons, point. I'm going to write a question on the board related to where we are in the argument. In the meantime, get up and move. Money takers, non-money takers. So the question so far is, would you trade the justice of your soul to acquire great reward? Where's the line? Is this the blue line? So you people over here are all the money takers. And you people over here are all the non-money takers. And you are, where's that foot? Aha. All right, well, this is a very interesting situation. Most of the people say, I'm not going to take the money, and people over here are going to take the money. Now, look at the people over there, and I want you to fix their faces in your mind, because someday you're going to see them on a billboard saying, vote for me. Remember who they are. Huh? Yes. However, my friends over here, you probably have some choice thoughts about them, right? Liars! Goody two-shoe types, yeah? Not going to take the money, huh? Well, if you're not going to take the money, one wonders why you need a ring. Now, before going on with the argument, I'm going to ask these people a question over here. What if it was only $1 million? Still take it, right? 10% management fee.
Do a lot of good with $900,000.
You could. $100,000 instead? I'm trying to see how low I can get this, you know what I'm saying? How low will they go? On the other hand, I could come over here, and maybe the problem is you know the math, and you're like, 100 million isn't going to last very long. I would need at least, honestly, about 7.5 billion. Okay, I raise the stakes. 7.5 billion. And you can't get caught. There you go. There, another one. See, these people know how to do math. Come on, keep it moving. Honesty. Look at the honesty wave. 100 billion. Still holding fast? All right, well, so these people over here are not having it. You obviously needed these rings, and you used those rings for all the good purposes we talked about. Okay? And the world began to love you. Everywhere you're doing charitable events. Now, of course, you quickly start to run out of funds, but fortunately, there's a lot of banks in Ohio. But why stop with Ohio? Right? Why stop with Ohio? Why not the whole United States? Why not Fort Knox? I hear there's a lot of gold in there. Yeah, pretty good, huh? You are so popular and so famous that you decide to approach real power, which of course is not just buying more cars and houses and shoes. That only goes so far, right? Real power is social power, influence. And so you decide to run for public office, for the President of the United States. And because you're so loved by all the people in the world, both parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, jointly nominate you. You say, oh, we must be doing great things. You solved the Mideast. You offered a peace plan for the Mideast. You invested so much money, they didn't have time to blow each other up. They're all in business. That's how popular you are. Okay? You got all the Nobel Prizes for the entire year. That's how popular you are. However, there's one catch, right? One of your campaign pledges is to put an end to the crime spree that's been occurring across the entire world. And this creates a problem. You obviously don't want to confess. So what do you do? What do you need? Can't stop robbing Megs. Got to keep the axles greased.
You feel like the stock market?
Well, that's not going to really solve the problem because that doesn't bring you more wealth. You could invest the money. Look at them all going legit. They don't understand how crime works, do they? You got to watch more of those FBI shows to understand how this works. You must keep on stealing to keep it going. Wouldn't it be great if someone else were to be responsible for this? Right? I mean, these goody two-shoe types think they're so holy, right? It would be interesting to see how they would react if they were accused of this crime. I think it would be interesting. I mean, how hard would it be? When you're at the Louvre, you know that silly picture with that woman with that smirk, which you never liked anyway? Roll that up and just put it under his mattress. Some of the crown jewels, when you hit the Tower of London, take one of them, put it in her cabinet. This isn't hard, right? And then you make an anonymous call to the FBI. Oh, you guys are in trouble now, aren't you? Boy, they come running, and they grab you, and they caught you red-handed. They've got the loot in your clothes, in your cabinets, everywhere, and they call you in for questioning. And they begin to ask you, where's the rest of the money? Why did you do it? And of course, what do? You protest your innocence. You say, I know nothing about this. I don't know how the Louvre, the Mona Lisa got in mattress? That's a very good question. And it doesn't take long of you proclaiming your innocence before the people have had enough. And so the police start using gentle, persuasive techniques, giving you lots of water and then not letting you use the restroom, keeping you up for a long time. Inadvertently, I want to order some pizza for you. Oh, bang, did I hit you on the head with the phone book? Darn. Third time in the last 3 minutes. But you're tough, aren't you? You love virtue. You said justice before all, and you still refuse to confess. So the president over here gets up and makes a speech to Congress and the world and declares all of you a clear and present danger to the national security of the United States. And not just the United States, the entire world. And you know what that means? The gloves come off. He calls over to his friend that curates that museum in Spain and says, you got any of that old equipment? He's like, oh, we do. Send an Air Force One to pick it up. And now you're going to find out the meaning of the word pain. The rack. You say, why would they rack us? To figure out where the money is. Right? Horrible things. And you're saying, oh, this is terrible. I don't like this at all. Well, there's a way out. All you have to do is tell us who the ringleader is. Who's the ringleader? Who did it? See that guy back there? That priest? As you remember the situation, don't you remember him being the one that led this whole thing, this whole effort? Yes, he says, I did it. Is it not true that it is good for one man to die for the people? Isn't that in the Bible? I'll tell you what, we'll make you a deal. If you confess now and pin it on Father Vince, all the tortures will stop. We'll give you $10,000 a month for the rest of your life. And because of the issues of keeping you quiet, we will have to put you on an island. But all the pina coladas you want for life, too. Okay, it's that island from the show Lost, but we won't tell them that, okay? Now, how many of you are like, I've suddenly decided that justice is no longer as important to me as it was before, right? After I've lost 3 fingernails, my teeth are being yanked out, I'm being burned, racked, and skinned, I'm like, that's it, I'm done. Then why don't you stand up and join those people over there? Or are you going to continue to say, justice no matter what? I will write another question on the board, and this would be the time for you all to stand up and join your friends. There, I hear movement. That's good. Would you trade the justice, keep moving, of your soul, torture, to avoid great harm? Oh, we've got some oh, look at that. He's going over there.
Came in late.
Nicely done. Nicely done. All right. So originally, would you trade the justice of your soul to acquire great reward? We had our money takers over here, right? Then we upped the ante, find out, do you truly value justice in and of itself, or just for the goodies or to avoid harms? And now you're on the rack and you're still saying, justice. That's pretty amazing. How is this possible? What is going on here? These people are saying power is of no value compared to the inestimable value of justice. So why? What is wrong with you people? Psychological deficiencies? Okay, some of you are worried about guilt. How about this? In addition, lifelong support from counselor of your choice, and all like the psychological drugs, 30 minutes. Good. All the psychological drugs you need to support yourself. Would that be useful? You want to go over there now? Oh, your people are tough. Wait a minute. This is a religious center. Is religion influencing you? Oh, I know what's going on. You know how to do the math, actually. You've calculated this correctly. Right? Okay, you're going to suffer tortures for 3 days. And then you die. And you go to eternal rewards. Those people over there, they will enjoy their lives for 3 months, 3 years, 30 years, and then what happens? Oh boy, are they going to get theirs. Yeah? But of course, that means, do you really love justice? Or do you just love the guy who's going to give you the biggest reward? What if God said this? Remember those 10 commandments I gave you? I've decided to change them. Now you must love other gods. Now you must steal from your neighbor. Now you must covet your neighbor's car and his ox and his wife. Now you must commit murder. What would you do then? Would you still love justice? Oh, I'm seeing a lot of skepticism in here. It's getting awful quiet. You say, well, that can't happen. Give me a break. Abraham, take your son Isaac out to Mount Moriah and burn him to crispy waferness for me. They're over here nodding. This is what we're telling you. Come on, join us. Are you sure you know what God would or would not do on this? Now, if you're suspicious about this argument, you are correct. And in the next 4 weeks, we will figure out exactly why. So just to give you a little hint, you're on the right track. But do we really value justice? I'll give you one last chance to go over there. And to help you out, I will turn away. No movers? Extraordinary. Now let's see what we've done. I'm going to make a small box because I have no eraser, so I'm going to make it right here. All of our goody two-shoe types, they appear to be just, but they are unjust. All of our crooks, future politicians, they appear to be unjust, but they are just. So we have totally flipped appearance and reality, haven't we? We've taken all the rewards typically associated with justice, stripped them from you, and put them on the unjust. And we've taken all the penalties typically associated with injustice from the unjust people and put them on you, the just. And if you still say, but justice is still worth it, then justice must truly be valuable in and of itself, right? And if you had a magical ring that would give you this extraordinary power to do wrong things and get away with it, you would still say, I'm not going to do it. So we have to think about why. We have to think about why. And let's start with these people over here. You've got all this fabulous wealth, immense power, tremendous popularity, right? But are you happy? I mean, that's what we did all this for, right? We would agree, would we not, that you're very pleasant? You have tremendous pleasure in your life? Right? Is pleasure happiness? I remember my mom once tried to make an argument to me about the distinction between happiness, and the illusion of happiness. Right? Is there a difference? If so, then did you make the right decision? But on the other hand, are they happy? Questions are being raised. Justice may be necessary for happiness for you over here. Maybe committing injustices will guarantee we'll never be happy. We haven't proven that yet. But that is a possibility. On the other hand, you over here, you've committed to justice, but where's the happiness? Where's the payoff? So we do have some deep questions we have to investigate. And the first one we're going to have to look at next week is this question. Well, what is happiness? Because we have excellent reason to think it's not what most Americans believe. At the end of the first Willy Wonka movie, what did Willy Wonka tell the little kid? Happiness is what? Having all your dreams come true, yes? Happiness, then, is the fulfillment of desire. It's getting what you want. It is, in other words, pleasure. But we had the evidence that that was false when we were 5 years old. You remember when you made your first Christmas list? You wrote it all down. I want all these things. If I get these things, I will be happy. So you send your letter to Santa. Your parents say they'll send it for you. Right? We'll stamp it for you too. Just save the money on the stamp. They open up the letter and they find out this is what this kid wants. And under the Christmas tree, what do you discover? all the things that you desired, how long does your happiness last? Within a day or two, you're writing your list for next year, aren't you? Now, teenagers are not much better. They just upped the things they want, right? They want to get the great college scholarship. They want to get the star. They want to be the star cheerleader, the star of the basketball team. They want to get the best grades and get all the top awards. But then, are we much better? Right? What do we want? We want to get the job promotion. We want to get the bigger house, the better car, the better retirement accounts. Trade in the wife for an upgrade. It's the same thing, isn't it? Exactly the same thing. We're just exchanging one set of wants for another set of wants. And no matter how much we get what we want more. It doesn't seem to work. So this is troubling, right? Another thing people think, not that happiness is pleasure, the other thing people think is that happiness is relative. That happiness is different for different folks. Happiness is whatever I want it to be. Who are you to judge me about my account of happiness? How dare you impose your happiness values on me? I'm offended that you would do that. You've heard these kinds of remarks before? If happiness were whatever I wanted it to be, then the secret to happiness is easy. Set limited goals. I will prove it to you. For me, happiness is crossing this line. I will now demonstrate. Drum roll, please. Oh my gosh. It worked. I am so happy. You got to try it. Deacon, you want to be the first? You don't buy it, do you? Look at the skepticism. How dare you impose your happiness values on me? Is that what you're doing, though? No, you think I'm full of crap. And for good reason. It doesn't make any sense. Happiness is the thing we want more than any other thing, right? Do we seriously think that it's going to be easy? So how can it be whatever we want it to be? If it were whatever we wanted it to be, everybody would be happy. Are people happy? No. So we Americans have been deluded into thinking that happiness is nothing but pleasure, that happiness is anything we want it to be. And therefore, you could attach it as some sort of a feeling to any activity whatsoever, like stealing money from banks and getting rich, like injecting drugs into my arm. But happiness is not a feeling. We just proved that because happiness and the illusion of happiness are different things. The illusion is the feeling, but you can have the feeling and not actually be happy. As many drug addicts have testified to, once they've injected the drug, they say, I'm miserable. You're like, then what are you doing this for? It doesn't work. Pleasure doesn't work. If you pursue pleasure, all you end up with is perpetually bored. And this is the problem with our young people. Right? You can only play so many video games and watch so much porn and do so much sports before you're just completely inundated with pleasure that leaves you completely bored and empty. It doesn't work. So, what we're going to have to do is figure out what is the connection between justice and happiness. Because our young people desperately need to understand what that link is. But it's not just our young people. It might even be us. What is it that's truly going to fulfill human beings? What is the true nature of the meaning of life? The next 3 weeks, that's what we're going to be exploring. Next week, what is the connection between justice and happiness? Questions? Oh, this is going to be fun. All right. See you next week.